This story is titled The Girl, Part 1. A dark skinned, heavy-set woman in her early 30s stood with her hands rolled into tight fists and resting on her hips. The woman was staring through the open window at the back of her house. It was a bright and beautiful sunny Saturday morning in the secluded village where the woman lived with her family. The entire Caribbean island where the village was located was also known for its lush beauty. Although it was only mid-morning, the sun was already high in the sky, shining hot and bright, scorching every inch of uncovered surface as far as the eyes could see. There was not a single cloud in the sky. In the atmosphere, one could experience the sweetest breeze as it whispered ever so gently, rustling the leaves on the nearby trees, kissing the bare skin of anyone in its path. The birds engaged in a soft rendition of sweet melodies from the branches. The village was cloaked under a peaceful spread of beauty. The sounds of children's laughter could be heard way, way out in the distance. However, looking at the woman's face, it would have been easy to conclude that the beauty surrounding her had no sway on her mood or disposition at that moment. Even though her face showed no emotion, the way her back stood ramrod straight, with her head perched high on her shoulders, it was easy to feel the tension radiating out of her body. The woman's stare landed on three out of her four youngest children, where they entertained themselves on a patch of green grass just outside the back of the home. The siblings, ages 3 to just under 7 years old, were occupied in an intense game involving marbles, a tin cup, and some dried leaves. The game was one that they had no doubt made up themselves and was adjusting the rules as they went. All three children, girls, had laser focused on the items in front of them, giving it their full attention. The girls were unaware of the pair of eyes staring in their direction, even though those eyes were only half focused on them on what they were doing. The mother was perhaps checking to make sure that her children had not gotten into any trouble, since there were no adults outside to act as monitor for whatever they might be up to. The moments ticked by, while the female figure stood unmoving in front of the opened window. The look on her face shifted slightly from emotionless to that of someone deep in concentration. Meanwhile, less than 10 feet from where she stood, another of her children, another daughter, sat huddled in one corner of the small living area. Unbeknownst to the rest of the family, the girl in the corner had been wishing that she could somehow disappear into the hard wooden partition that was pressing into her back as she tried to make herself invisible. Briefly, the girl picked up at her mother, waiting for the woman to acknowledge her. Or perhaps she was simply dreading the moment when her mother would realize that she was in her presence. Luckily, though, for the girl, her mother moved away from the opening, where only moments earlier she'd appeared to be studying her younger children. The woman made her way deeper into the dwelling. Even though she had not acknowledged this child, the girl squirmed, burrowing deeper into the corner as the woman's footfall drew closer, then carried her past where the girl huddled over. The youngster gulped in a shaky breath and held it in, waiting for what she was sure would happen once her presence was made known. She knew that there was some form of punishment awaiting her in the not-so-distant future, even though she could not recall what she had done this time to warrant such. The woman proceeded deeper into the house without borrowing a glance in the girl's direction. The youngster let out the breath she wasn't even aware she had been holding in. Relieved that she was okay, at least for this moment, her mother did not appear to be angry with her, as was often the case. She didn't seem to be the one responsible for her mother's mood this time. But just to be on the safe side, she thought it wise to remain inconspicuous. She murmured on an exhale, "Do not call attention to yourself," knowing that after all, it only took one member of her family having a bad moment in their day for her to be blamed as the cause for their distress. The girl thought it best to escape the house unseen while no one remembered that she was at home that day. Creeping out of the corner, she made her way into the kitchen area, which also served as the dining room on rainy days when they could not have their meals outside, and as a bedroom every night of the week. Sneaking out of the place she sometimes called home. Well, when she was not staying with her grandmother or anyone in the village who would take her in for a short period, the youth breathed a sigh of relief. Taking in another deep breath, she took off at a gallop. Heading down the asphalt-covered road, she made her way past the junction in the middle of her village. She already knew her destination. Running, she bypassed the first entrance, which would have taken her down to the river, a place where she would normally seclude herself under the shade of a tree at the water's edge in an effort to find just a few moments of comfort. But not today. Continuing further along, she also bypassed the second and the third entrances, which would have taken her to the home of familiar faces and people she knew from her village. But at that instant, only the thought of being in the company of one person promised safety for at least that day. The image of the elderly woman loomed in her psyche as she trekked on. Then finally, arriving at the entrance that she needed, the one furthest to the right of the intersection, the girl turned and dashed down the uneven pavement. A short time later, way off into the horizon, she could just make out the shape of the house of her intended destination, the home of her great grandmother. With eagerness, she pumped her long bony legs, her bare feet slamming into the hard surface, which she no longer felt since she could not remember ever owning a pair of shoes. The building grew closer with each step she took, and a wide grin overtook her narrow face. Moments later, she breathed deeply, relishing the growing distance that was now separating her from her mother and the rest of her siblings. She had no doubt in her mind that she had just successfully evaded today's punishment. This concludes part one of The Girl.